Hi, my name is John Douglas, and I'm a planning consultant who works with a lot of cities on the preparation of housing elements. In addition to my planning work, I also teach a course on housing elements in UC Irvine's graduate urban planning program. In this presentation, we'll introduce the housing element and learn about the process cities go through to update it. State law requires each incorporated city and county to adopt a long-range plan called the general plan for its physical development. General plans are typically divided into chapters or elements covering different topics. 8 of these elements, listed on this slide, are required to be included, but a general plan may also include other optional topics of local interest. Fullerton's general plan, called the Fullerton Plan, was last updated on a comprehensive basis in 2012. For the purposes of this discussion, the housing element is most relevant. The housing element was last revised in 2013. A separate discussion on the land use element is available as part of the speaker series number 3. The general plan is founded in the Fullerton Vision. The Fullerton Vision is a mission statement for the general plan and identifies what Fullerton hopes to maintain and become through the implementation of the Fullerton Plan. The Fullerton Vision was developed through public input and the work of the General Plan Advisory Committee and was approved by the City Council in 2009. Specific to the housing element, the Fullerton Vision identified that Fullerton will be a city that has increasing choices of accessible, affordable, and desirable housing options, which enable our children, workforce families, and young professionals to make their home here, and for our seniors to remain here. The general plan is a community's blueprint for future development as established through goals, policies, and actions, as well as maps and exhibits. Each element has 1 or 2 goals that provide a statement of aspiration or intent to achieve a desired condition. For the housing element, the goal is having a sufficient supply of safe housing, ranging in cost and type, to meet the needs of all segments of the community. The housing element contains a number of policies and actions that contribute to the attainment of this goal. They can be summarized into 4 categories. Housing production focuses on making sure that the city's plans and development regulations create sufficient opportunities for all types of housing to accommodate the city's housing needs, and also using the city's administrative powers to encourage and facilitate housing development. Conservation and rehabilitation supports a range of programs focused on maintaining or rehabilitating the existing housing stock. Design and livability establishes policies and actions to enhance the quality and livability of the built environment, such as supporting energy efficiency and other sustainable building techniques. Lastly, access to housing opportunities deals with improving housing opportunities for persons with limited resources or special needs, including those with disabilities and the homeless. This includes efforts to preserve existing affordable housing, remove barriers to fair housing, and address long-standing patterns of segregation, discrimination, and neighborhood disinvestment. Now that we've covered the basics of Fullerton's housing element, let's look at why and how the housing element gets updated. State law requires cities to update their housing elements every 8 years. These updates are sometimes referred to as cycles, and the current housing element covers the 5th cycle, which runs from 2013 to 2021. The next housing element update for the 6th cycle will cover the period from 2021 to 2029. Cities must submit their housing elements for review by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. The state legislature has delegated authority to HCD to review housing elements and issue opinions regarding whether a housing element fully complies with state law. When HCD issues a letter finding that the housing element complies with state law, it's referred to as certification of the housing element. This certification process is important because if a city does not have a certified housing element, it may be ineligible for some grant funding, be subject to lawsuits, or lose some of its local control over housing development. The housing element update process has 2 main components: policy, action, and regulatory review, and land inventory. The Policy, Action, and Regulatory Review examines existing general plan policies and actions, as well as associated city regulations, to identify any changes that need to be made to ensure continued compliance with current laws and best practices with respect to housing, including those targeted for special needs populations. We'll look more at housing for persons with special needs on the next slide. The land inventory analyzes the availability of sites in the city to accommodate housing needs for all income levels, including emergency shelter facilities for the homeless. If the land inventory identifies deficiencies, the city will need to adopt policies or actions to ensure sufficient sites are provided. This could result in corresponding changes to the land use element of the general plan. A separate discussion on the land use element is available as part of the speaker series number 3. State law establishes 6 categories of special needs, and specific laws apply to how cities regulate housing for persons and families in these categories. In the context of the housing element, elderly means persons age 62 and older. State law recognizes that the elderly may face housing problems related to fixed incomes or other issues such as physical accessibility, and the housing element analyzes the number of elderly persons as well as the housing issues they may face. In particular, the difference between owners and renters is examined, since renters may face more difficulties obtaining affordable housing. Large families refers to those with 5 or more persons. Large families with modest incomes, particularly renters, may have difficulty finding homes that are large enough to avoid overcrowding, which is defined to be more than 1 person per room, not counting kitchens and bathrooms. Persons living with disabilities may have difficulty finding suitable living arrangements, and cities can help address these issues through things like zoning to allow supportive housing, which is housing that includes services, and through flexibility in zoning and building regulations when needed to accommodate a person's disability. This flexibility is referred to as reasonable accommodation. Cities are required to analyze the extent of homelessness and help address this issue through zoning regulations that simplify the permit process for emergency shelters and navigation centers. Single-parent families, identified in state law as female-headed households, may have more limited incomes and other difficulties, such as affordable childcare, as compared to families with 2 working adults. Lastly, while agriculture is not as prevalent in Orange County as in some parts of California, like the Central Valley and the Inland Empire, state law establishes specific requirements regarding how cities regulate employee housing for farm workers. The land inventory component of the housing element is largely based on addressing the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA. RHNA is the process by which each jurisdiction is assigned a share of the state's housing need. This process begins with a population growth forecast for the entire state, and then each region is allocated a portion of that growth. Orange County is part of the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG region. Based on projected population growth and the issues of overcrowding and overpayment, HCD determines the number of additional housing units needed in each region. After HCD assigns the RHNA total to the SCAG region, SCAG then distributes that total among the region's cities and counties based on a variety of factors established in state law. The RHNA allocations are also broken down by income categories, which I'll explain in a moment. The importance of the RHNA is that cities must demonstrate their ability to accommodate the number of housing units at each income level that are assigned through the RHNA. This is done by identifying available sites where new housing development could occur and creating programs or regulations to encourage housing development. It's important to keep in mind that the RHNA is a planning target, not a development mandate, because it's ultimately up to developers to build on available land. There are a variety of tools that cities have to facilitate increased housing development. These are explored more in detail in speaker series number 2 and 3. This slide shows the different income categories that are used in housing elements and the annual incomes and maximum monthly affordable housing costs associated with those categories. There are 5 categories based on percentage of the county's median income. These numbers are based on official income limits that are published each year by the state, and they're adjusted for family size. The numbers in this table are for a 4-person family. The affordable rent column assumes that rent, including utilities, is no more than 30% of a household's gross income. The column on the far right shows a ballpark estimate of the affordable purchase price for moderate income households based on typical interest rates and other costs such as homeowners association dues and property taxes. But since those can vary widely, the $500,000 figure in this table is only a rough estimate. Also, this table only estimates sales price at the moderate income level because the majority of affordable housing in the lower income categories is provided by rental apartments. Speaker Series number 2 includes a more comprehensive discussion on these income levels with respect to the Fullerton vision of accessible, affordable, and desirable housing options, which enable our children, workforce families, and young professionals to make their home here and for our seniors to remain here. This slide shows Fullerton's RHNA allocation for the current 5th housing element cycle by income category compared to actual housing production for the first 6 years of this 8-year planning period. Note that the extremely low income category is included as part of the very low income category for RHNA purposes. As seen in the bottom row, Fullerton has already achieved 86% of its total RHNA allocation through the end of last year, which is very encouraging, but production in the low and moderate income categories is substantially lower than in the market rate category, and moderate housing development was minimal. This slide compares Fullerton's RHNA allocations for the 5th and 6th planning cycles. The important takeaway from this chart is that the RHNA allocation in the 6th cycle is far higher than in the last RHNA cycle, over 13,000 housing units compared to less than 2,000 units in the previous period. Although questions have been raised as to the validity of the housing need assigned to SCAG and local RHNA allocations, there are 4 key facts to keep in mind for the housing element update. First, there's a housing crisis in California. Second, housing production must be significantly increased at all income levels in order to address the crisis. Third, city and county governments are essential partners in a comprehensive effort to facilitate the production of more housing because local governments have the authority to approve projects and issue building permits. And finally, the goal of the housing element is a supply of safe housing ranging in cost and type to meet the needs of all segments of the community. To wrap up this presentation, I'd like to review the steps that cities typically follow when updating their housing elements. In the data collection and analysis phase, in addition to the regulatory and best practices review, relevant statistics are collected regarding demographics and housing needs, including both existing needs such as overcrowding and homelessness, as well as information about future needs over the next 8 years and potential strategies for addressing those needs. Public outreach is an essential part of the process because city stakeholders have valuable knowledge about local housing needs and potential strategies that can help to address those needs. The city then prepares a draft housing element for review by the community and city decision makers. Draft housing elements must also be submitted to HCD for review prior to adoption. HCD issues its opinion of whether the housing element fully complies with all of the requirements of state law, and cities have the opportunity to revise the draft housing element to address any concerns before the housing element is finalized. As part of the final housing element adoption process, public hearings will be held by both the Planning Commission and the City Council. After adoption by the City Council, the housing element must be reviewed again by HCD for a final compliance determination. If HCD determines that the housing element fully complies with state law, it's referred to as housing element certification. As we discussed earlier, certification is important because it expands the city's eligibility for grant funds and also provides legal support for local control of the city's land use planning efforts. We hope this presentation has been helpful in understanding the housing element update process, and we thank you for your interest.